From millions of copies sold in the 90s to now less than 1,000 active players across the whole genre. This is Anti-Gravity Racing. Up until now, I covered the first few Wipeout and F-Zero titles that have since become the staple of the genre, but they weren't the only ones around. Some big names tried their hands at AGR games, and they ended up flopping so badly that hardly anyone remembers them to this date. All that effort and experience just to get destroyed by one hidden gem of an indie game. We start with Konami, a publisher that already had some legendary franchises under its belt, and here comes another. Speed King was first released on an arcade machine. The motion rig was impressive. The game itself, not so much. Starting with 2 tracks that are wide and speed based, while the next 2 are tight and twisty, barely enough to overtake your opponents. Beat all of them and you'll unlock the fastest speed class and an uninteresting reverse track, but we're not done. The game has a one-on-one mode where you can win new vehicles that are references to Konami games. You can unlock 8 ships that actually vary in terms of how they handle, which is surprising considering how basic the overall handling is. This is the first 3D AGR that uses what became known as floor hugger physics, where gravity is either ignored or heavily increased to make the vehicle stick to the track at all times. This makes the elevations pointless, with jumps often being scripted. You're playing a fake 3D game at this point. Kinda ironic how some anti-gravity games don't even have a concept of gravity. But anyways, the small field of view and render distance make it difficult to see the upcoming corners, but at least there are signs before them and your co-driver calls them out, and because this game is made in Japan, he also screams "Go!" whenever you cross the finish line. They also pulled the laziest trick in the book to artificially inflate the track count, the mirror mode. Reverse tracks can be excused, but all mirror mode does is flip your screen and steering inputs. Yes, it's that lazy. This game's style suggests that some effort was put into it, but unlike F-Zero, I don't think the people in charge knew how to make a racing game. Like they actually added support for the Negicon controller, but the handling is too basic to take advantage of the more accurate analog inputs. Worse yet, the game forces a horrible input filter on regular gamepads, making the driving even less pleasant. The final nail in the coffin for this game was its optimization on the console port, with constant slowdowns and frame rate dropping to 20, a number that was barely achieved with Jet Moto, a game published by Sony and made by the creators of the highly acclaimed Twisted Metal, who attempted to replace hover cars with hover bikes. This game is full of cheese, advertisements, and character stories that no one cares about because it's a Grand Prix game. At first, you could argue that this isn't an AGR, and I agree, because I don't think even the creators knew what they were going for with this game. It feels like the animations that play out when you fall off the bikes are more advanced than the bike handling itself. It's very inconsistent and unpredictable overall. You can hit a tree and still keep going, or barely graze an invisible wall and still fall off the bike, and then respawn right off a cliff. The AI is so incompetent on some tracks and destroys you on others. Their movement is all over the place. The tracks do have verticality, but you have no thrust while in air, so I'm not sure why they added jumps. And for some of them, you have to slow down because they probably didn't account for players going too fast, or abusing walls to take corners. The only unique gameplay feature are the poles that you can grapple onto to take corners, but it's not going to carry the rest of the game. It is also stretched out with useless modes and repeated races in championships, 7 out of 10 IGN. But I don't get this game. Still, they must have milked enough sponsor money to make a sequel. But first, let's check out Sega's exclusive AGR that was actually released 3 months before the first Wipeout. It even includes a story mode. You're some hotshot sled pilot chosen to represent Earth in the Cyber Speedway. Yeah, these guys used the cyber prefix 20 years before it became cool. And then cringe again. You have a coach who gives you some sled tuning tips before each race. Listening to him turns your sled into a boat. But no worries, cause you'll never need to use brakes anyways, as the side boosters are the primary way of taking corners. There's combat, but with only one weapon that follows a straight path and is difficult to hit. You win races and move to other planets, with their only difference being background and color, but at least the aliens are unique.
You're hot stuff, but here I'm what's cooking.
You'll beat the game after winning in its 6 tracks, and that's it. The game itself is as shallow as its story, with uninteresting races and basic handling and combats. Now let's see what Jet Moto 2 improved on. Well, this updated version of the game runs at 30 FPS at the cost of less racers, the physics are more consistent, and the bikes are more planted while still maintaining their handfulness. For some reason, however, you now lose speed while in air, and worst of all, have no thrust. I don't understand why they did this since braking works in air, but you can't correct your jumps if you miss them slightly. And it's a shame because the tracks are very creative overall. The final track, for example, takes place in heaven. The updated version is no longer stretched out, with all tracks, even ones from the first game, being unlocked from the get-go. Jet Moto 2 is an improvement, but not by much. Still, it's clear that they focused less on cheeseballs and more on gameplay, but an unbelievable 800,000 sales meant that we still have another Jet Moto to look at. Oh no, they added more cheese, and the game speed is inconsistent. We have the addition of half pipes, except the camera is still slow so you can't see what's ahead. But I have to say, the environments look amazing and have much greater diversity. These environments are horrible when used as racetracks. One of the track sections literally looks like a maze. Are we playing a racing game here? No, I saw collectibles, but they don't appear in single races, so you have to risk your Grand Prix to get them. These new tracks are wider and have more jumps, but there's still no thrust in air. I'm not asking for an Oppressor Mark II, but aren't those jet or rocket engines? The final track especially has more jumps than any other track, and half the time you're either under or overshooting them. Beat the game and you get a cutscene showcasing the game you never got, and to add insult to the injury, you get a bonus card with reverse tracks that do not work in reverse and a useless stunt mode that unlocks after collecting all the coins. They added a jump button, which I forgot it existed because it's only needed on the second to last track. On the other hand, jumping is a crucial mechanic in Millennium Racers, which is the best hover bike game I could find. And that doesn't mean it's good. Jumping combined with slow acceleration make this game all about keeping momentum and platforming your way through the fastest paths. The bike handling is simple, but they do have their limit and actually feel nice with analog controls. The platforms and obstacles are basic as well, and some are copy-pasted across multiple tracks, but they still offer a fair amount of variety. The collisions are so bad, the game forces you to lose control whenever you hit someone, which is its most annoying aspect along with rubber banding. Overall, I'd rate this game below average, and that's partly because it leans more towards platforming rather than offering vehicular complexity, so maybe you will find some enjoyment out of it. The same, however, can't be said with Jet Moto 3, which is the worst entry in the series that was already mediocre at best. It was developed by a different studio than the first two games, but only half of this mess is their fault because Sony forced them to speed up the bikes at the last minute. One developer used some clever tricks to achieve better graphics with less performance costs, but I don't care. This is a racing game, you need good driving and stable frame rate. Not pretty graphics, useless characters, or catchy sound effects. The game ended up selling poorly, leading to its sequel being cancelled and the series forgotten. But I'm sure there will be someone in the comments saying how much they loved Jet Moto, not knowing about the much superior alternatives they could have gotten instead. Like this free demo game. Hover Racing is an obscure indie game from '97, with simplistic graphics but in-depth driving mechanics. Not only you have rudders as a conventional way of steering, but also 4 side boosters that can be activated separately. These boosters are placed at each corner of the vehicle, where wheels would be. Activating one makes you turn, activating 2 diagonally makes you drift, and you can activate 2 on the same side to either swerve on straights or extend your slide and accelerate while doing so. The game just gives you so much control with these boosters. I was surprised to see an unknown early indie game have its driving on par with F-Zero, from which they've clearly taken inspirations from with a health boost system. But wait a minute, F-Zero X came out a year after this game, and we even have a training mode that is very similar to Gran Turismo's license tests. These short and gimmicky driving missions are fun and equally as frustrating. There's 15 of them, along with 9 full tracks in the Grand Prix mode. Complete the Grand Prix and you unlock the fastest ship, with no rudders or main boost. Complete the driving missions with all 5 ships and you unlock this. The tracks have simple layouts, but the elevations and obstacles do a good enough job to differentiate them. You have boost pads, jump pads, refill pads, dirt patches, power drainers, and occasional jumps that require pitch control. Most of these are clearly taken from the original F-Zero, just like the ping-pongy collisions that are worsened by oversized hitboxes, which is the main downside of this game. Hover Racing is truly a hidden gem. Developed nearly 30 years ago by people we don't know anything about, this simple game with innovative mechanics retains its uniqueness to this date. A few people have picked up on it during the years, but not enough. It's less than 2 MB and runs at smooth 60 FPS on PlayStation 1 or its emulator, so I definitely recommend you check this one out. Hover Racing was likely made with passion. The next game, however, was made with greed. Hyperdrive is an arcade game where you insert coins to play. Win a race and you get to race again for free. But here's the thing, you can't win, and the game doesn't even try to hide it. Just look how fast the first place moves on the minimap. I'm assuming this is something the arcade owner can set because I did find videos of people winning, but I couldn't figure it out despite beating their time. The game looks flashy, but extremely basic at its core with not much more to say about. And the same goes for Killer Loop. At least this one's trying to look unique with its weird tripod design, and the driving is just as weird. The acceleration is rapid on downhills due to extremely high gravity, and I guess it was still not enough because they added a magnet mechanic making you completely hug the track. It is quite useful, as the handling is too icy otherwise. Aside from energy and magnet recharge zones, the game doesn't provide much challenge in terms of tracks. Same goes for its basic collisions and weaponized combat. The slow camera doesn't let you see what's ahead, though there's no need to because not only the walls are rideable, but also most corners are banked, so the gravity keeps you away from hitting them. The same, however, couldn't be said for the IGN critic who didn't like the tight tracks. And he still gave it an 8! The next game tries to bring gravity-defying elements to wheeled vehicles. I excluded games with wheels in them, but this one was published by the same people who made Wipeout. In fact, they dubbed Wipeout Roll Cage Without Wheels. The idea was to have flip cars with so much downforce and ground effect that they would be able to drive at any angle. Let's see if they achieved that in this 20-second gameplay montage. It took them a year and another game to finally implement downforce, but now every track feels like a circle. The verticality, split paths, and destructible props come off as a gimmick, as the gameplay isn't centered around them as much as you would expect. There are more game modes this time around, but nothing noteworthy other than the unique time trial challenges. This series was highly regarded back then, but that's mainly because other car racing games at the time had equally shitty physics. Also, that's why hover cars were more popular. Anyways, the weapon pickups have a wide variety, with each class having access to a different set. There's even the Noob Tube Blue Shell from Mario Kart, and here's how it works. You press one button and a missile hits whoever's in first place 100% of the time. If that sounds broken, that's because it is, so don't do that. These games are the opposite side of the racing spectrum. But that's exactly where they went. 2 years later, they secretly recycled Roll Cage and sold it as a kids game called Firebugs. The name and the boring characters in the cover do not indicate that this is a racing game, and at its core, it's Roll Cage 2. The physics and weapons are completely identical. The tracks are easier, making the verticality even more pointless. The increase in noob tube drop rate and the addition of useless mascots suggests that they tried to turn Roll Cage into a shitty Mario Kart ripoff. As if Mario Kart isn't already shitty enough. One of the former developers updated the Roll Cage games for modern systems, but otherwise this would be the last time that we saw the flip car concept for a long time. And also before family ruined the term. Some old games are fondly remembered because they were great, and the others are fondly remembered because they were better than nothing, and every game in this video falls into the latter category. Except for Hover Racing, that one's great, and that is the end of this episode. Tune in next time as we finish off all the other 3D 5th generation games and also some technically 4th gen ones. If it's released, you can find it on the screen or in the description.